Good news. It's their one this season. Yay! They'll get.
And Deebo and Aiyuk still on the Niners.
Yeah.
I think that's a good deal.
Yeah.
We got some sound to play.
Remember, that's what I said was going to happen. Friday. You said that you thought Deebo was going to get traded, but you didn't want to see it. But you were fearing the worst. And I told you, Jennifer Lee Chan and I told you, just relax.
But Baldy joined the guys this morning.
What do you have to say?
He said that Deebo and Aiyuk's replacement was drafted.
Very possible.
Ricky Pearsall.
But that's not news, is it?
No, it's about, we're talking about next offseason then, right? Because if you were to lose one of those guys that can ball, Gamer, Steiny, you wanted to be able to refurnish the
what do you want to do?
What do you mean?
Do you want to restock? Do you want to refurnish the house?
Yeah, restock, yeah. During the draft. So I don't expect any one of those guys to be traded, but you can't question, like Baldy told Shasky and Bonte, you don't use a first-round pick on a position that is not in need. And I just feel like the wide receiver position was not in need, but Kyle must feel like he needs another weapon.
My question is this, the 49er fans. How much better did you get this weekend? How much better did you get this weekend?
Well, we won't know, right?
We won't know about any team. But does it feel like the San Francisco 49ers are better today than they were on Friday or Thursday? I don't know. How many guys that they've drafted can we say are going to start? I mean, Ricky Pearsall right now is their third receiver.
Okay.
Renardo Green is a cornerback they drafted out of Florida State.
Position of need.
And then their first offensive lineman was taken in the third round.
No doubt.
Dominic, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Puny out of Kansas. So that they waited till the third round to get an offensive lineman.
Got a running back too, Steiny.
Yeah. Well, it's important. It's important because the running back was a mid-round pick. Those tend to be more successful.
And a wide receiver from Arizona, Jacob Cowling.
Yeah.
You
know why they did that? Because they're not sold on Pearsall.
Oh, nah.
Why else would you do that? I mean, the question I have to 49er fans is did this team get better? And I think the big news from the weekend, obviously, is Brandon Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel are still on the team.
And that's why I'm going to say they got better.
Why?
Because they didn't lose one of those two going into next year. And this Kyle Shanahan sound at the boss
that doesn't
he spoke
count.
On it. You don't want to take 2 steps back for 3 steps later on. He was saying this window, talking about the 5-year run they've had, you don't want to take a step back. And he was talking about the money in the contracts.
They might take a step back. 888-957-9570. Want to talk about the San Francisco 49er draft. So I came in today thinking, all right, they ended up taking a receiver in the first round. They got a cornerback, which they said they needed. They got an offensive lineman, which they said they needed. So, okay, see how these guys pan out. Nobody knows if they're going to be any good or not.
Right.
And we move forward. I come in today, and the boss is, I wouldn't say apoplectic, but he's flummoxed. He doesn't think the Niners had a good draft. He doesn't think they did enough to address their positions of need, which were the offensive line and the defensive secondary. He said, what was one of their positions of strength? Wide receiver. And you drafted a wide receiver. So how do you get better if that's a position of strength?
That's legit.
So,
but the boss, on the other hand, Steiny, just like everybody else, how do we not know they didn't find a Brock Purdy at cornerback, this youngster out of Florida State? I mean, all these guys that got drafted, that's the beauty of it. We don't know, but I guess he was sharing with you how he felt. Like if I asked you for a grade for the 49ers, Steiny, I'd be faking if I said A-. Like, I didn't like the wide receiver in the first round, to the boss's point, but how can we grade something that we don't know, is yet to play out?
Here's the way I look at it. And I look at this team the last 2 years, and it went to the NFC Championship 2 years ago, and it went to the Super Bowl last year. And I know they didn't have a first-round pick in the last 2 drafts, but if you look at who they drafted, they didn't get a lot of contributions from young players because they're in a Super Bowl window. So when I look at this draft, I don't see 4 new starters being a part of this draft from the weekend. I think that's going to take time. I think the 49ers maybe got better for 2 or 3 years down the road, but did they really get better right now? And maybe they feel, and I wouldn't hate on this,
Tell me.
that they feel like they're still right there. They're one of the best 4 or 5 teams in football.
Okay.
And they did nothing this offseason to jeopardize that. And if they hit on a couple of these picks, maybe they'll be better.
I'm not mad at that, but my biggest takeaway from the Niners happened in the Super Bowl, and it's how you replace Greenlaw if he's not available till week 8 or if he's available at all, Steiny. So I'm looking here. You needed some offensive line help. You touched on that. You needed some secondary help. You got a free safety, a cornerback, and a safety. So I don't know if these dudes are going to play, and you mentioned start, but it's about production. Can you help? And when you go to the Super Bowl and you're minutes away from winning it, Steiny, I guess one could say, how much help do you really need? We all need help. I get that, but, I mean, this team was loaded.
If you ask me what did the NFL draft tell me about where the Niners are and maybe what their strategy is moving forward, to me, I think this offseason was about staying as competitive as you possibly can at the top of the NFL in terms of the top 4 or 5 teams. But there's no doubt the 49ers are also putting an emphasis on their finances, and they're putting an emphasis on down the road a couple years. I mean, they told Armstead after he said he didn't want to renegotiate, they moved off him. I think clearly the draft of Pearsall signals that Aiyuk or most probably Deebo Samuel won't be on the team maybe next year at this time. And so the 49ers, to me, are trying to stay in a Super Bowl window right now, but they're also trying to set their path for the next 2 or 3 years. And they know that they've got some decisions to make, and they also know the biggest decision is probably coming next year with how much money to pay Brock Purdy. They got to get their finances in order, and I think that's one of the things we saw this year and this draft. And here's the other thing I think, Goo, you tell me what you think of it. I get you could have maybe not drafted a wide receiver, drafted an offensive lineman in the first round, and said to yourself, well, none of our 2 receivers are going anywhere this year. So I think what the 49ers did is by drafting Pearsall, they guaranteed they're not going to have to address the wide receiver position next year, even though they probably know right now they're going to lose a wide receiver, but they won't have to go through the draft or free agency to get another one. They hope they got that guy on the roster with Pearsall. Well,
I'm not mad at that, and Pearsall went 1. I just keep going to last year's draft, and I know it was the 7th round, Ronnie Bell, who to me, Steiny, I'm not baldy, but he's shown flashes. I thought he could play, and he's a 7th rounder, so the comp is bad, the comparable, but I'm like, okay, are you already telling us you don't have any faith in that kid? So you would think that, them drafting Ronnie Bell last year, he would be Pearsall. This would be his time to get more opportunity. But the question and the right on the table for me is, do you think, because you mentioned the word finances, that Brandon Aiyuk, who I assume was going to get his chicken before week 1, do you think they have him come in here and play this last year out on his contract?
I don't. And I was thinking about that. Man. And I was kind of talking to Evan about that because I had a thought. And 49er fans, feel free to jump in here at 888-957-9570. Does drafting Pearsall give the 49ers more leverage in terms of, well, now we're going to make Aiyuk come in and play his last year out before we extend him?
Man.
But I don't think the pick has anything to do with that. If they're going to do that, they're going to do that whether they have this guy on the roster, I think, or not. I mean, I don't think you draft a rookie so that you can change your strategy with Aiyuk to play hardball. Like, I don't think, I mean, it might have been an offshoot of a reason, but there's no way that was the main reason. Hey, we get Pearsall in here, and now we can play hardball with Aiyuk. I thought about whether there'd be a connection there, but I just don't see it.
And you know what? You might be right, and Aiyuk may not be, he may get his chicken, and Deebo may be the one gone if they decide to make a decision.
When you say may get his chicken, it sounds to me like you still have doubts about that.
No, I wouldn't want, like when Kyle said, like, you're the 49ers, there's no making the playoffs constitutes a good season. It's about, getting to the Super Bowl again and finally getting over the hump. And you talk about a possible holdout with Brandon Aiyuk. What does that equate to, Steiny? It's what Bosa's did. A holdout. That's a distraction. And you can avoid that by giving Brandon Aiyuk his chicken, Steiny, or you can roll the dice and be like, you know what, just what you said, we're going to play hardball. But if I'm trying to keep everything intact, the one thing that we did lose was part of our heart and soul with Greenlaw. I can't shake that until we find out if they got an adequate replacement. But, man, I don't want to, after all this noise about one of the receivers being traded, I wouldn't want Brandon Aiyuk to come in and feel like, what the F is going on? They got me in lame duck status, you know?
Well, he could join Deebo Samuel, who then says, well, join the club because you and me
Deebo
are
got his money, Steiny.
Yeah, but Deebo's replacement was just drafted.
We think.
Huh?
Well, or we don't know.
That's conventional wisdom.
Yeah.
I mean, are 49er fans assuming that Brandon Aiyuk will get signed? I mean, I think you have to assume that at this point.
Mm-hmm. I would bet on it.
So, 888-957-9570 is the number. Bottom line, 49er fans, did you like their draft over the weekend? And what does it tell you about where they are right now? Or maybe more importantly, where do you think they are? Because to me, I feel like the 49ers still feel like they're in a championship window. Maybe they didn't do a ton in the draft to address some of their bigger needs, but they drafted a wide receiver to give them protection, I think, for next year if they lose one of their two, most likely Deebo. And then they know they're going to have to pay Purdy. That's the other thing that I think was a big part of this offseason. Kyle Shanahan, and we're going to play a lot of Kyle Shanahan sound today, but one of the things he said, you kind of saw what we did in free agency and we went about it that way. And I think what he meant was we didn't break the bank in free agency. We got Leonard Floyd at a good number, but we've got to start getting more constraints on our financial situation. And that was, I think, a big part of this offseason. Let's go out to Philmo Mike. Philmo wants to talk about the draft. What's up, Philmo? How you doing, buddy?
Steiny.
Yo.
I know you're trying to deliver content.
Yeah.
But guess what, buddy?
We
don't know what these players finna be, bruh.
Right, I know.
Straight up, Steiny.
Yeah, I know.
We don't know what they finna be. So,
right, it's about
okay.
Philmo,
okay,
it's about
okay,
it's about it's about like what you thought of the positions they addressed at what point in the draft, and hoping that each of these guys can contribute. I don't like when
teams get needs. Get the best player. You feel me?
Do you think they thought?
Don't get Sam Bowie.
Do you think they thought Pearsall was the best player at 31?
Yep.
I do too.
I do.
I do.
I think that they thought that he was the best player at that position at that time. What we have to do is we need to take this, and I know you're trying to drive content for your show right now, but you got to understand, we ain't going to know what these players are right now until we get 6 months from now. Like, we don't know what they're going to be. Who knew Deebo was going to be Deebo? Who knew George Kittle? I remember watching George Kittle. Well, who the hell is this white boy from Iowa or Idaho? I don't even know where he's from. Who cares? When they get on the field, it's going to show you what they do. And I think the receiver is a hell of a player. And I also feel that Kyle Shanahan, he drafts from he be picking like defensive players. He's an offensive coach, so I'm glad that he just, I'm picking up who I want. Pick up who you want to make your team do what they gonna do and what they need to do. I love that from him. This is the first draft that I felt like he was just, I want him, I want him, I want him, I want her, whatever. I need them. I don't want you drafting defensive players, bro. Draft your offense, your offensive team. I don't know why the Niners are associated with defense when their coach is not, it's not Bill Belichick, it's Kyle Shanahan.
I hear you, Mike.
Yeah, well, it's more than just Kyle drafted, Steiny, and it's two sides of the ball, Mike. And I feel you on those comps you gave, but the Brock Purdy comp is the one that puts the whole draft in. Like, that's the dude, the last pick of the draft, Steiny, and he's balling out, about to get a bag.
So, did I say the 49ers were better?
No.
Did I say they had a great draft?
I was going to jump in.
I Filmo Mike.
Yeah, select to hear from Mike. I was going.
Filmo.
You didn't jump in on him. I had your back.
It's a Monday morning. Yeah. I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
But I'll tell Filmo Mike and the listeners this. It's like the boss. I was talking to the boss, and he goes, "Nobody knows what any of these guys are going to do. Nobody knows."
That's the fun of it, though.
Right?
Yeah.
Of course. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Renardo Green's a difference maker.
Right.
I have no idea. But it's about the positions they picked at the times they picked them.
Yeah.
It's about what they did and do with their 2 wide receivers, which is trade them. It's about knowing they have to pay Brock Purdy down the line. And how do you think they handled all the things that they needed to deal with? I'm
looking at the checklist, Steiny. 3 defensive players. And to Mike's point, Steiny, I disagree with him in this sense. And maybe he wasn't trying to convey this point. But damn, you have to draft both sides of the ball. The Niners defense is, a top 3 unit, or was going into the playoffs. So you got to fertilize that. They got a cornerback, a safety, a linebacker. And again, we don't know if any of these guys are going to even make the club and be able to bring something to the table. But when you look at balance, or you talk about balance, they got wide receivers, 2 offensive linemen, a running back. I like it.
From the text line, I'm going to trust you on this one, 510. I'm going to trust you. I'm hoping you're being honest. 510 says it's pronounced Pooney. It's an Islander name. Pooney. Thank you very much, 510. Appreciate that.
Pooney?
Pooney.
All right.
He's their 3rd round.
Not Puny.
Pooney.
Yeah, Pooney.
Out of Kansas. Dominic Pooney.
All right.
He was their 3rd round pick, and he is a.
But you said something that hit me a second ago, Steiny, because I told you Friday after they drafted Pearsall, I was like, they needed offensive linemen, but they felt like there wasn't an offensive lineman worthy of that first pick. And that's why they went with Pearsall, to you and Mike's point about drafting the best player on the board.
Here's Kyle Shanahan. This one to me is very, very interesting on how 2025, which is next year, had an impact on how the 49ers drafted this year. Kyle Shanahan.
It's hard to say there's a lot more because it feels like it's been almost this way 3 years in a row. I think it gets a little more each year because it gets harder each year. And the hardest thing is when you go through the draft, and especially when you feel you're a contender and things like that, you want to do everything to just look at your board and how you fill those holes and everything, but that's not really how the draft works. It's how it comes to you, and you got to look at it at different levels and through different layers, and you got to think right now, and you got to think ahead. But being close like we were last year, feeling we're going to have a chance to at least have an opportunity to try to do something like that again, you want to think always what helps us now. But then you get to that spot, and there always isn't that answer right then. And so you go with what kind of helps us now or what helps us more in the future. And so you're just constantly weighing that, whether it's the draft, whether that's free agency, and everything.
Yeah, so that tells me that the 49ers, when they selected at 31, thought the quality of the pick at wide receiver was significantly better than the quality of the pick would have been on the offensive line.
And I get that. I didn't get it until I heard it, Steiny, and that's the way to go. And I guess that's what that was his point, but that's what they did. But for Mike to say, or anybody out there, Kyle shouldn't draft defense, that's not how it works. Lynch is involved. They're all involved. You got scouts, recommendations. It's not just Kyle.
888-957-9570 is the number. Steiny along with Guru. We're talking about the NFL draft and the San Francisco 49ers. A team that made it to the Super Bowl just a year ago.
Yeah.
How do they get back there? And do you think they're more equipped now to get back there than they were, let's say, on Thursday? And I guess that's what the boss is saying, and that's what I agree to a certain extent. Like, if you look at the draft and you look at a Super Bowl contending team, how many rookies are really going to be able to step in and be difference makers? When you draft, it's a bonus if you get one of these guys to produce in his rookie year. So my feeling is that tells me that they think what they have right now still can get it done. Or what they have right now is capable of winning a Super Bowl. And they thought that if you keep most of this team intact and try to fix some of the edges, tweak some things around the roster, and upgrade just a little bit in a lot of different areas, that they can be as good or better of a football team.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound like they think that they got noticeably better in the draft right off the bat. Like they got to wait and see, and then it's going to take some players probably a little time to start contributing if this team's as good as you think it's going to be.
Yeah, and you lost Armstead, and I know some games or some weeks he was the poster boy for inconsistency, but you got to replace his production. I know Ray with McLeod. I don't even got to tell you what the fans think of him, but he's gone. And Steiny, you're right. How many of these guys are actually even going to make the team? We don't even know that part of it. But when you talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, they've added some speed, and they did that through free agency, also through the draft. I can say already just they got better. But the 49ers are a powerhouse, especially offensively, and the fact that Deebo and Aiyuk will be in the red and gold week 1 to me, Steiny, and McCaffrey, obviously, and Kittle, and Purdy, you got action.
Yeah, I was reading Tim Kawakami in The Athletic today, and he was talking about how he thinks the 49ers have begun a transition here. And it's a transition from everything and anything in terms of being all in to we've got to start trying. We're now still trying to win now, but we absolutely have an eye toward the future and where we're at money-wise. And he cited, obviously, Armstead refusing to renegotiate, so they had to move off him.
Yeah.
He cited the fact that they've got 2 terrific wide receivers, and they look to move them over the course of the last week as another sign that this team might be in transition. And then he cited, obviously, the drafting of a wide receiver, which probably sets in motion losing a wide receiver, possibly Deebo Samuel, in a year. So what he's saying is every decision now probably has a ramification down the line. And now it's a matter, can the 49ers stay at the level they're at, which is one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the NFL.
No doubt, Steiny, and that's why I told you in 2019, the window doesn't stay open forever. They didn't have this facing them. Now it's a reality when you talk about the restraints, the cash, the chicken, the moolah. Now you have to make decisions, and you look at your team and you say, you know what, as you scratch your head, you're like, you know what, we're not going to be able to afford everything. But that, and I'm not being Debbie Downer here, but that's why when you get as close as they gotten, and even last year, Steiny, you want to cash that check because you never know what's going to happen when you have to make decisions, not of want, but because of finances.
I mean, would their decisions be drastically different had they won the Super Bowl?
Well, no, but they would have that trophy to be like, you know what, if we take a step back, not that we're trying to, we took advantage of that window being open. And still, I feel like that's the case right now. I don't think Armstead, and I got to be careful here, I respect his game, but Steiny, I don't think their defense is going to take 2 steps back because he's somewhere else. Now, the Greenlaw replacement, I'm telling you, Steiny, that is a big component to all this, and they'll put the guys in place that think they can, gorilla glue and duct tape it, but we'll see how that hurts this offense, Steiny, because I can tell you, thank you, they're not better without Greenlaw until he comes back,